What's up, everyone? We're back for more Locked On Bucks. Frank is here with me. We have got some injury updates with Milwaukee, which we will get to leading into the game against the Cavs. As we discussed yesterday, 3 days off, which is rare for Milwaukee, particularly when you look at how many games they've played this season. We'll look back on the weekend a little bit, some of the more on-court stuff that we perhaps didn't get to on yesterday's Grayson Allen podcast, but let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show daily and find my work over at ESPN. Joining me, as I mentioned, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. We thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every single day. Some vibrant comments yesterday. People were engaged. What a shock, Frank. I thought the Grayson Allen podcast would get the comments section popping, particularly on YouTube. It did. If you missed that podcast, you want to hear about Grayson Allen, feel free to go back to that podcast. But we're going to talk about the on-court stuff a little bit, Frank. The Bucks did pick up two wins that they probably should get, but they took care of business, which is important leading into this Cavs game where, as you correctly pointed out to me before we started recording, there's only half a game between the Bucks and the Cavs. But where do you want to start from the weekend? Because there was a bit that happened across these two games.
Well, I mean, you and Justin, by the way, for people on YouTube, I really need a haircut. I think that's what I just want to lead off with. I really need a haircut. My hair is just doing like really weird Conan O'Brien stuff. I'm like trying to get my hair to not be crazy and floppy around, but it's not. Oh, well. Donte DiVincenzo. I mean, you guys talked about it briefly last night with Justin, but, you know, it kind of figures, right? The old secret Donte joke, right? Like he has his like by far best game of the season on a night when they're playing the Kings and there's a Packer game and nobody's watching, right? Unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, it was obviously great to see him really over like the course of that back-to-back. You guys talked about it. I mean, I think just getting that like run and just some reps was helpful. I mean, the pass on Friday night.
Oh,
that pass, Giannis gets a great block, and then Donte, I don't know how much ground he covered, but the bounce pass he throws, that was a better pass than anything Aaron Rodgers threw on Saturday night. Unfortunately, we could have used more Donte DiVincenzo passes by Aaron Rodgers on Saturday night. But
I'm too scared to go there, Frank. But you can do it. You can go there.
Yeah, as a Packer
I'm going to stay
fan,
out of it. I'm staying out.
Yeah, I'm just so thankful for the Milwaukee Bucks being NBA champions. I tweeted it out after the game. I don't take the Packers as seriously as a lot of people in Wisconsin, which I'm thankful for on, weekends like this. It just sucks. It's too bad on a number of levels, but just what a weird season for them with all the Rodgers stuff. But obviously very disappointing, and who knows, right? Who knows what happens with them? So we'll leave that to our friend Peter Bukowski and company to figure out. But yeah, I thought Donte, that pass kind of stood out. By the way, Friday night was like, it's kind of funny, right? Like if you told me that the Bucks were, like 2 weeks ago, if you said the Bucks are going to beat the Bulls and you're going to want to just like burn the videotape and forget the game happened, like I would not have expected that, because obviously the Bucks need wins. They need to kind of get back to winning, claw their way back up in the standings here with everything so tightly packed. And the Bulls, at the time, I think we're still technically the first seed in the East. But as you guys pointed out, right? Like, I mean, they're missing a ton of guys. DeRozan was obviously tremendous, but they were missing a bunch of people. And Bucks are at home. Granted, obviously a lot of Bulls fans in the crowd, but obviously you're supposed to win that game. And the shooting from both teams was horrendous, and the Bucks just very unconvincing down the stretch as well. And of course, we'll talk about the Grayson Allen thing at the end, because I think we agreed, like, I don't want to lead with more Grayson Allen stuff. I have a couple thoughts on it, but like, let's talk about basketball. And then if people don't want to hear more Grayson Allen stuff, which if I were you guys, I probably wouldn't want to hear more Grayson Allen stuff. Right. But yeah, it's just a weird game. Like one of the more forgettable possible games that like on paper was a big win, right? Like just by virtue of where the Bulls were in the standings. And, Giannis had his like 30 and 12 and 5 or whatever he had. I mean, Giannis put up numbers, which of course, that always satisfies Frank, but But even that was kind of like, he missed a lot of shots, kind of settled for jumpers there for a while. So not a game you feel great about. And then, we talked about, I think last week, I think it was in the Raptors game that Giannis did something, looked like his knee was bugging him. He was icing it while he was on the bench. We speculated that, there may be a rest game coming up for him or it would help him. So I was not shocked when the news came out that he was going to miss Saturday night's game, but obviously that put pressure on Chris and Drew, who were not great on Friday night. Chris has obviously been playing really well. Drew, we were looking for him to get back to where he had been. And obviously with, Donte, another opportunity for him with Grayson Allen missing out. You hope that he can kind of keep it up. And I mean, I'll start with Donte. I mean, again, just really impressive. Just some of the passing. He had like 2 straight possessions where he just whipped passes to cutters inside. I think one of them was for a layup, another was for a foul. So when he's just kind of like playing with confidence, playing with rhythm, again, his finishing has been like an increasingly problematic part of his game. Like basically every year it's gotten worse. Obviously this year, like when he started 1 for 10 on layups, that's obviously not indicative of who he is, but I think what's important about him and what we've talked about is he obviously can help you because he sort of does just a lot of stuff, right? The whole joke about Donte DiVincenzo doing stuff. And I thought, seeing the 3-ball go down, getting some cuts, he had an important cut for a basket on Friday night, hit a couple free throws. In that Kings game, he, sneaks behind the defense, gets some cuts for easy layups, and he makes them. Yay. And then, just his passing and sort of his kind of his work as a connector. When Eric Name and I talk about Donte, we sort of talk about his value as a connector, which is kind of one of the like more subtle things that's hard to explain, right? Because he's obviously not like a point guard. He's not like a guy that you're going to put the ball in his hands and ask him to create. But when he gets kickouts, when he's, driving the ball up the floor, when he's running little pick and rolls, like you just kind of trust him to make the extra pass, get other guys involved, even if he's not, again, sort of ever like the focal point of the offense. So yeah, just really encouraging for him. And I think certainly we see, this game on Wednesday with Grayson Allen going to be out again. I'm not sure if it's technically for an injury. I guess it's going to be for the suspension. But another opportunity for Donte to, make an impact. Obviously, they're going to have to lean heavily on him and George Hill. And, now it sounds like Wes Matthews with a knee contusion will miss at least Wednesday, and knock on wood, hopefully not more, because obviously you're getting Donte, hopefully getting him to a rhythm. But, I don't know. I don't think anybody's, you had Boogie and Wes come in at the same time. We talked a lot about Boogie, but obviously I think we agreed pretty early on that what Wes was showing us was, far more significant in sort of a playoff potential way. And he's continued to play very well on both ends. And seeing him come up hobbling on Saturday night was obviously a concern. And so for him, hopefully he's just out a game or two, something like that. I guess we'll find out more. But at least right after the game, Bud didn't seem too concerned. And I guess so far the news doesn't seem bad, but again, just sort of underscores like how important it is just keeping guys healthy throughout the season. You're going to get knocks and missed time here and there, but you just want to avoid, the big injuries and, like the torn ACLs and things like that to these guys that obviously maybe not huge parts of your rotation or starting lineup, but I mean, I could see Wes Matthews being a really important part of the playoff equation for the Bucks, at least in certain matchups. And, especially with the way that he kind of came out of nowhere, it would sink on many levels for him to be out for an extended period.
Kind of surprising that Wesley Matthews, as you kind of pointed to, we spent some time when he first signed. What are we going to get from Wes Matthews? What role can he actually play? He's been playing over 20 minutes a night, and part of that has been some of the absences they've had, but also he's just played pretty well. So we'll see what happens with the injury stuff there. And obviously Donte might see a boost in production, which you could be interested in if you're playing Prize Picks. Our Bucks fans, you've been hearing me tell you about Prize Picks for months. Have you signed up yet? Because if you haven't, it is the perfect time right now, because for a limited time, Prize Picks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for our listeners. Users get $50 free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point, but you must use the code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On Bucks fans, only who use the code NBA. Prize Picks is the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over and under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. So go to prizepicks.com today, or use the app that you can get at the App Store, or uses the deposit and use the promo code NBA. Get $50 free if your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. That's right, or uses that deposit and use the promo code NBA will get $50 free on your first PrizePicks entry if they score a single point. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Frank, you mentioned our friend Peter Bukowski, and of course, you're listening to Locked On Bucks to start your day. Or maybe some of you maniacs, I know, listen in the middle of the night, wherever you are in the world, which we really appreciate. But the point being, it's your first listen. But then go to Locked On Packers with our friend Peter Bukowski if you want any of the wrap-up, perhaps some projections ahead to what's potentially going to happen there with the Packers if you're into that type of thing. But he does a great job. He's very upset at the moment. He would be cheered up if you listen to his podcast, so that would be great. As far as availability for this game with the Cavs, it will matter though, Frank, because this is a Cavs team that has gone through injury issues of their own. Ricky Rubio's been out. Colin Sexton has missed most of the season, to name just a few. But they are only half a game back of the Bucks, and Donte figures that he'll be playing an extended role here. There's no doubt about that. But just as the Bucks start to get a bit of momentum, it's kind of been the theme of the season. You think, okay, well, we've got a healthy injury report here. 3 days later, it's not the case. And across the NBA, we've seen that it's not so much the COVID stuff at the moment. They kind of had that huge wave and they went over the other side of that. Now it's just random injuries and obviously suspensions as well. But we have spoken about the fact that the schedule doesn't necessarily get easier here over the next month. So games like this against the Cavs, where the Bucks find themselves one game off the number 1 seed, but also one game out of the 6th or 7th seed, it really matters.
Yeah, and especially because right now, I mean, the seeding and the games behind is a little funky because, as you mentioned, the Bucks have played the most games of anybody. Yeah. So they have the same number of losses as, I think. Let me double check here again, but I think the 6th seed might have the same number of losses as them. The Sixers are 27-19 at the 6th spot, and the Bucks are 30-19. So when you look at the loss column, the Heat, Bulls, Nets all have 17 losses, and they're all clustered with either 30 or 29 wins. So literally a half game separating those 3 teams. And then the Bucks, yes, they are only 1 game back, but that's masks a little bit the fact that they're 2 losses behind. Mm-hmm. So that's why, again, why just the emphasis on just sort of taking care of business. And again, I mean, you look at it, Cleveland, if they win this game on Wednesday, they would go to 30-19. Bucks would drop to 30-20. And I think if the Sixers win another couple games, then you're right there, literally at the 6th spot. And the Hornets are 26-21. So I mean, they're not even that far behind you as well. They're 3 games back technically. And right now, at least, they also have the tiebreaker on you because they've won 2 out of 3 games so far this year. So yeah, there's not really a lot of room to sort of kind of take it easy. And, just thinking back to previous years when the Bucks would just kind of pick random games to rest, Drew, Chris, and Giannis, just to give them a little bit of a rest. That's tougher to do. And I think that's one reason why you felt really good about Saturday's win. I was way happier about beating the Kings at home than about beating the Bulls at home, just because of the injury circumstances. And, again, the Kings were missing De'Aaron Fox, so it's not like the Kings were at full strength either. But anytime you can get a rest from Giannis, and, again, just really impressed the way Chris ties the season high with 34, just playing so under control. And Drew, looking back to the way he was before he had the COVID and ankle injuries, that was just obviously a huge bump, and they just got where they wanted against a Kings team that obviously is not known for their defense. And then, you layer on top of that just some of the supporting cast help, beginning with Donte. That's, again, just kind of a nice way to bank a win, certainly against a team you should beat. But to be able to do it, you give Giannis the night off, and then he gets 3 days off on top of that. Hopefully, obviously, that knee is feeling better here on Wednesday. And I feel like these long rest periods typically have not been good for the Bucks. So I'm a little wary of making oh, they're going to be so well rested. I think 4 days off for Giannis, 3 days off for the guys I worry a little bit that that's going to translate into a lot of missed jump shots and maybe more rustiness than we hope. But again, we'll see. I think, on paper at least, as well as the Cavs have played, look, tonight they were missing Jared Allen out with an illness. They barely beat the Knicks at home, so not exactly the most impressive win from them tonight. But at the end of the day, like they started, Dean Wade, who hit 4 threes. Which, by the way, Dean Wade always throws me off because I think he went to Kansas State. He's like a stretch 4 type guy. Obviously not a guy you'd look at and say is a above average starter. But they start Dean Wade. They started Ed Davis in Jared Allen's spot. And they still have a bunch of guys, who you kind of go up and down the roster who you'd say, some question marks, let's say, right? Kevin Love's been playing much better. He had 20 and 11 tonight. We know what he can do, and especially when Giannis is guarding him and just sort of ignoring him, letting him shoot up in threes. So we'll see kind of how the Bucks defend them. But probably I think the Allen injury is the most interesting to watch, just because he's obviously a key part of their defense that has been much improved. And as good as Mobley is, I think Allen is the last line of defense around the rim. He's been a guy that has. I'm not like he's like shut Giannis down or something like that, but like Giannis has dunked on him a bunch of times. He's gotten blocked Giannis a bunch of times as well. It's a pretty good battle. I'd rather, if all things being equal, only have to deal with one of those tall rim protectors between him and Mobley in the paint. But obviously they're a good team that has continued to crank out wins. And I thought they were going to drop off after the Rubio injury, but they've really hung in there. And big credit to them. They've continued to play at a high level, even with guys in and out with injuries. Kind of similar stories as kind of what a lot of teams have been dealing with. So. Yeah, I mean, I'll ask you this. I mean, there are teams I look at like, the Heat, the Bulls, even the Bulls, the Nets. When the Bulls get healthy, I could very easily see those teams finishing ahead of the Bucks in the standings. I think the Nets, we're going to really see, these next few weeks, like they have a really tough schedule coming up. That Durant absence is going to be testing them significantly. Embiid is playing awesomely for the Sixers, although perhaps they're just going to keep Ben Simmons, which hurts their chances this year. But Cleveland is probably that team in the top 6 that I most look at, and I just say, like, at some point their youth is going to catch up with them, right? Like they're not going to continue to play this well. But again, they've just continued to win games. And if you go into Cleveland on Wednesday and lose that game, well, now you've lost 2 out of 3 to them, albeit one of them was without Giannis. And again, you just sort of look at the Bucks, and it's like, 50 games in the season, you're kind of stacking the odds more and more against yourself, just being able to kind of climb up that ladder in the East.
There's just not too many teams that when they have a rookie as one of their most important players that they're able to get to that level. They kind of remind me a little bit in the East of Charlotte last year, who spent some of the regular season around the 4th and 5th seed. LaMelo Ball was playing out of his skin. Now, he did get hurt and Charlotte had some injuries, but they ended up dropping back to the play-in. So we'll see what the Cavs do. But as you pointed to, those tiebreakers are going to be important. And by the way, we have got Chris Manning from Locked On Cavs. I'm going to catch up with him tomorrow. So if you have any questions about the Cavs or you want to ask Chris anything, you can hit us in the Twitter comments, the YouTube comments, wherever you can contact myself or Frank. You can get on to us and we'll throw the questions at Chris. I got to ask you about Grayson Allen before we wrap this up. First of all, I'll mention Bet Online, who wants to wish everyone a happy new betting year as they continue the march towards the playoffs and beyond in football, obviously, but basketball, hockey, and a bunch of other sports have still got a way to go before the postseason. But it's a new year, and there's a new updated desktop and mobile website, so you can sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started there. For football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Frank. This is the topic that it's impossible to avoid. It's almost comical to me how front and center it still is. And maybe part of it is the fact the Bucks haven't played a game and it's a weird part in the schedule. I don't know. But I can't believe that it's still such a talking point. You would listen to Justin and myself yesterday on the podcast. So I've got nothing else to add. What do you got, Frank?
Well, I also just want to be able to get back to focusing on basketball. But I think, I guess a couple points. I mean, I think if we had recorded like right after the game, I think the thing I would have brought up is something I think we've talked about in the past, which is, as soon as people start to speculate on how many games somebody's going to be missing due to, a flagrant or a fight or anything like that, like any of these like questions of multi-game suspensions, things like that, always take the under, because and I think maybe this has highlighted it just because there's been so much talking about it, but the NBA just does not tend to suspend players for multiple games due to like flagrant foul type situations, right? Go back to the playoffs when Giannis just completely, basically demolished Mike Dunleavy into the first row of the crowd. I remember back then looking at like, I remember digging up like a list of like suspensions and trying to find comparables. And I was like, man, it is really hard to get suspended multiple games. If you look at longest suspensions, it's basically they're all like drug related suspensions. And then there's like the Malice in the Palace suspensions. And then there's some examples where there were like brawls and guys like instigated stuff and kept fighting and things like that. And you saw multiple game suspensions for that. But just as far as like just like a one-off hard foul that was a flagrant and got a guy kicked out, like it's extremely difficult to find it. If it's a hard foul, a flagrant, gets a guy kicked out, and then he goes and like starts punching dudes, okay, then you can see multiple game suspension. But to think that like, something that looks like a basketball play, and again, I think the way I would characterize the play was it was, a reckless play given the kind of speed at which they were going. And I think the follow through that you guys mentioned as well, I think the follow through with the right hand is sort of what like, a couple things I think sort of flip the narrative a little bit. Like one, as you guys pointed out, like Grayson Allen's never going to get the benefit of the doubt because his college history, he's a Duke guy and people don't like the way he looks, right? Like he looks like a guy that you want to dislike, right? Not to say if you saw Grayson in the street, you would be like, oh, screw that guy. But there's something about him on a basketball court that, people like Michelle Beadle, who I used to like on the NBA show on ESPN a lot.
Mostly because she used to take the piss out of Paul Pierce at every opportunity.
Yeah, I thought she was great on TV. I just caught some clip of her new athletic show, and she was like, she was saying like half of her argument on Grayson Allen was that he had a punchable face, and I was just like, is this a serious rationale for wanting him to have a long suspension? Is that he doesn't look like somebody you like? But so he's got that working against him, right? And again, you can argue it's not fair, but he has a history, right? And then the fact that like, again, most guys, we saw it this weekend, that most guys are not like rushing over to check on someone when they commit a hard foul, but he didn't do that. And then there was the shot of him smiling about some joke or whatever was told in the huddle. And again, it's all optics. Like people just are going to hate that. And so it's just all these things kind of like going against him, like one after the other. And it obviously kind of compounds what was, again, as we saw this weekend, like a play that is not super uncommon. But then the fact that Alex Caruso ends up injured, obviously that ends up also playing into the motion, especially if you're a Bulls fan. Obviously you're like, God damn it, like our dude's going to be out for 2 months. But I thought it was interesting. I was watching the No Dunks guys today, and Taz was going like way like, in the kind of emotional suspend him for whatever. But even Taz was like suspend him for 3 games. And I thought it was interesting because Trey Kirby, who's a Bulls fan, was like actually like very kind of like diplomatic and kind of understood like, yeah, it's probably 1 game. And Skeets was like, yeah, it's probably 1 game. Because again, that's just the history of how the league tends to punish these types of incidents. And, it's hard. It's a bang bang play. And I think that, I think they brought it up as well. Like if you're punishing guys based on how long people are out, then, Nikola Jokic wouldn't be playing the last like 2 months or whatever it is since, the whole Markieff Morris incident, which by the way, I'm team Jokic all the way, like screw the Morris brothers, but he's still, even though Morris started it, like Jokic still took a cheap shot at a guy from behind and the guy hasn't played in like 2 or 3 months or whatever it is now. So, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of my day worrying about Markieff Morris, but again, I think that's just a extremely slippery slope to go down, trying to legislate like because of a specific injury that happened when, unfortunately, as we saw with the THT and the Kelly Oubre fouls this weekend, like so much of this just ends up being luck as to whether or not, guys just kind of fall slightly wrong and get injured. So I think it was not surprising that the league kind of operated the way it did. And then I think, again, but like, honestly, do I like care? Am I going to go to Twitter and argue vehemently if they'd given him 2 or 3 games? Like, no, honestly, I don't care that much. Grayson Allen is a Buck. I cheer for him. He seems like a perfectly decent guy from everything we've seen and heard about him from here, as well as in his last couple stops in the NBA. But again, you do stuff that gets people hurt and it's a little reckless. You're gonna have to deal with some of the consequences. And I think it stinks for him that because of some of these things that at this point he can't do anything about. All this has been amplified and there's so much noise about it. And people who don't really watch basketball even seem to have opinions about it. But I think hopefully just playing basketball again will take the focus off of this stuff and shift it back onto basketball. But the tough part is like this is gonna follow him around now, right? People got this mad about him committing a flagrant foul when he didn't really have much of a history of this stuff in the NBA. If he has another flagrant foul, it's going to be way worse. So it's going to be interesting to see just like, what this kind of does to his style of play. It's not like he's like a rim protector or something like that, but he's kind of like Donte, where he'll come flying in to try to make, highlight reel blocks. And sometimes he actually pulls it off. So again, he's not like your defensive stopper, but I am curious if this impacts him. And the next Chicago game is going to be very interesting when they play in Chicago, right? Like, I'm sure the crowd is going to be ruthless with him, and we'll see kind of what that means in other arenas as well. So yeah, it's just a tough situation. And again, but he's the one that committed the foul. Bad things happened after it, and nothing you can do about it now except just kind of play basketball and hope that the playing kind of takes the attention off all the extracurricular stuff. So anyway, that's the end of my rant, and I don't think we need to talk about him much more in terms of suspension stuff. Hopefully this is the last of the Grayson Allen suspension talk we have this year.
Certainly hope so. We had one comment on YouTube from a Bulls fan that said, "You just wait until March 4. Payback is a bitch." And I was like, well, I don't know what that means, but I'll be watching that game on March 4th. And I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see what happens there. But we'll leave it there.
Hopefully we don't need a Thanasis. Thanasis is the last guy who like got into some trouble because of his exuberance in terms of playing hard. So I don't know. Hopefully we don't have to see Bud dust off Thanasis for some late game back and forth.
No, we don't want any of that. But as I mentioned, Chris Manning from Locked On Cavs will be on the podcast tomorrow. Also, don't forget to check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Get those questions through on the Cavs, though, if you have any. We're talking basketball, strictly basketball tomorrow. So that's going to be fun, and then we'll be back post-game for Bucks and Cavs on Wednesday night, which will also be nice. We haven't seen the Bucks play for a few days by that point, but we'll leave it there for Frank and myself. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.